Hey guys, it's Kate and I hope you're having a great day. I'm here with today's new watercolor tutorial and that is covering glazing. So glazing is a great technique with transparent watercolors because you can overlap your colors and make them deeper. You can blend them on the page and do all sorts of neat things. So I want to show you some quick things here. And I have my B paper, it's 140% cotton, my Cotman watercolor field set, and this is a nice palette from Winsor & Newton, and I've got a couple different brushes. So I've got some dry color blocks down on here, and I wanted to show you first a couple of different glazing color combos that you can kind of work with in your own projects. So I have them labeled here, but this first one I wanted to do something with neutrals and earth colors. So my base color is Payne's Gray, which is a really nice kind of blue gray, and I'm going to dip into my yellow ochre and just kind of blend a little bit with some water on my page, and we're going to see how that looks over the Payne's Gray. And I'm just going to do a stripe. Next up, I'm going to try my burnt sienna and just give that a little bit of a mix in my tray too, and do another stripe. And I love neutrals and earth tones. They're just really beautiful. They're great to have in combination with other colors that you're working with. And you can also mix them, and I'm going to show you that too when we get to complementary colors. Okay, so my next square, oh, by the way, that is burnt umber that I put there on the bottom. So my next one is same color, and that one I did with alizarin crimson, and I'm going to dip into and mix some more alizarin crimson. And this is a great way to just deepen your color and make it almost more opaque, I guess you could say, although it's still going to be pretty transparent because that's just a quality of watercolor. But you can see the difference even though it's just another layer of the same color. Next, I'm going to do primary mix. So right now I have some cerulean blue hue, and I'm going to go into my lemon yellow. And I'm just going to kind of mix this over to the side just a little bit, get it into my brush. And this is a great way if you don't want to mix colors in your palette. You can mix them right on your paper. So as you can see here, putting the yellow over that blue actually makes kind of a nice green. And when it dries, you can see it even more pronounced. But you can overlay colors on your painting just like this if it's dry. And they will, because they're transparent, again, they'll just kind of shine through. This is going to be light over dark, so I'm going to take a couple of different colors. I'm going to start with that lemon yellow, and I'm going to go over my Payne's Gray. This is another Payne's Gray block, and it's a pretty dark color. It's one of the darkest I have in my palette here. And then I'll do some of this golden yellow too, just trying to find some spots to mix it. And yellow is kind of a nice color because it tends to, you can really see it shining even though it's over a darker background. Now the yellow itself is going to be darker, blended in that way, but it really can have a beautiful look. Now I'm going to go into my yellow ochre here again, and one thing with yellow ochre is I noticed that it's a little bit more opaque compared to other watercolors, and it will actually block out more of that dark color, although it will take on a darker tint. And then we'll go with dark over light. So I've got some leftover Payne's Gray up here, and I'm just going to kind of blot or dab into that, and we will do the same thing. And if you contrast that with the plain Payne's Gray block here, it almost, you can see the yellow kind of glowing through it, and it has a really nice look. So I'm going to also grab some of this burnt umber and kind of mix that again in my tray. And we're going to do a stripe of that. And then another thing, and we're going to do complementary, but I'm going to also test it here and over the red, but let's do complementary color mix next. So one thing that you can do to make browns, and even when you're doing a glazing technique like we did to make this green color up here, you can mix your complementary colors that way. So think blues and oranges, purples and yellows, reds and greens. When you mix those together in different ratios, you'll get different browns and neutral colors. Adding a little bit of red to green will kind of tone down your green, and the more red you add, the more brown it will get. And so I'm going to kind of demonstrate that a little bit here with this purple lake. And so I mixed up some lemon yellow, and lemon yellow is kind of a stronger color, but you'll see a bit of a brown hue that starts to come out when this color is overlaid over the purple, and it will start to kind of take on a neutral tone. And I will add a second coat there later once it dries, so you can see, you know, the different ratios of blending. So I'm actually going to do the opposite, dark over light, right here. Whoops. If my little pan doesn't stick to my brush. Okay. We're good to go now. Okay, so I've got some purple lake on my brush, and I'm actually going to use that in the last spot here, dark over light. And this should also make a bit of a neutral color compared to this purple over here. And we'll do a close-up later, but for now I'm going to set this aside to dry. Well, I'm going to set this aside to dry, and we will revisit it. Now, another thing that I really like to do, and this is a great practice, especially if you're getting a new palette, and that is to blend your colors. Now, I know not everybody here works on cotton paper. The paper I just did was B paper, 100% cotton. This is Artist Loft 140-pound cellulose. And so what I like to do with palettes, especially some of these smaller mixing palettes, is do one of these grids, and they're very easy to do. You basically just paint a stripe going in order, each color, and then you do the same thing going across once it's completely dry. So where I have drawn these little black boxes, those are the pure colors. So for instance, with this Viridian, my Viridian stripe here meets my Viridian stripe here. So this box is pure Viridian. This box is pure yellow ochre. And then everything else is like a glazing blend. So you can quickly see exactly what kind of color you'll get when you do a glaze. And so I have this one started on B paper, and so I'm just going to finish it up. And actually I'm going to try to make my lines narrower because I only got to yellow ochre on this one, but I still had burnt sienna and burnt umber to do. So I'm going to grab my flat brush and start going across so you can see how I do this. For this one, I'm going to be just dipping into the pan directly and get a pretty good load of color. So I'm going to start with my lemon yellow and get it from the pan, and I'm going to do a smaller line than I have on my other paper. And I'm just going to drag it slowly all the way across my page, and I'm going to go over it one more time just to make sure it's evenly distributed, but I'm not going to overwork my brush or scrub it or anything because I don't want to lift any of the paint underneath. So I'm going to do my cad yellow hue next, and same thing, I'm going to get a line started and keep it pretty narrow and close to that lemon yellow so that I can try to fit all 13 of these colors in. Okay, next up is Cad Red Pale Hue, and I've got a pretty decent load on my brush. And in this particular palette, there is a Cad Red Pale Hue and a Cad Red Hue, and that's these two right here. To me, on the paper, they look very similar, but I will demonstrate both of those to you. There are slight differences, but to me, not really a huge difference. I'm going to pick up just a little bit more color here and go across, and you can see those colors are very similar. Okay, next up, alizarin crimson hue. And so I'm going to load up my brush and get that stripe going all the way across the paper. So I'm going to grab the corner of my paper here and just come across with my burnt umber, just like that. And so I'm going to set this aside and let it dry. And I'm going to come back to this paper, which is completely dry now. Okay, I figured it would be easier to just to clean out my palette a little bit. So I'm going into my lemon yellow again, and I'm going to add a second coat here to my existing yellow block over the green, and you can see how it brightens up considerably in this little quadrant. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the alizarin crimson hue, and I'm just going to kind of put an extra little block here, and you can see every layer deepens that color even more. So here I had the yellow ochre, which I'm going to dip into here and add a second little line to the right. Then into the burnt sienna, like that. And then into the burnt umber, right here. And I think you get the picture there. So what I'm going to do next is go into my purple lake, and I'm going to add another coat over here where we have our primary mix. And you can see here, when you start covering up with more of that top pigment, that sort of neutralizing effect kind of goes away if you're working with a darker color. Now let's see how we do with the lemon yellow, adding a second coat over this purple. It really kind of enhances that neutralizing effect. So you can see here, you can see more yellow, but you still have some of that neutral coming through as opposed to the dark over light when you're adding the purple, and you can really just see a lot more purple, although you still do see some of the yellow coming through because they are transparent colors. So I'm going to let this dry again, and I'm going to show you kind of some real world examples of where you might use some glazing. And these are just some watercolors I threw together in a couple of minutes. And so I've got a couple of flowers here, and I'm going to grab my quill brush. And this one is Purple Lake, and they're kind of like a mixture of colors. And I'm actually just going to go right in here and just pick up what I've got in my palette and mix it all together, and we'll go from there. So I've got a pretty good load of color on my brush. So something you might do with glazing is put on a second layer of flower petals here. And so let me kind of show you what something like that might look like. And you can get some really pretty effects because, as you can see, it gets darker where they overlap, but then you also have the lighter color where it is on the plain paper. I could also do like a darker, more rich color. Let's say I wanted to add a nice dark red over this one. I can absolutely do that. And it just adds some extra interest. And if I wanted to, I could also go into my green here and see how I mix that with a little bit of its red complementary color, and it neutralizes almost to a darker green, and then it would start turning brown. I can come back in here and just add some more detail if I wanted to. And it can blend with that wet color that I have down there right now. Now I can go into the same color and neutralize, or I'm sorry, I can go into the same color and I can intensify this and just kind of add a second layer and maybe some more texture and maybe a little bit of detail on that bud. And same with the other ones, I can go back in and just add a second layer of color to darken that and make it a little bit richer. Now with leaves, you can get really, really beautiful effects by having neutral colors and mixes and all kinds of stuff. So let's say for this one, I want to keep it simple and I just want to add some veins. That's a good glazing technique. And I'm just going quickly with my brush. So these are not veins that you would want to have on your leaf, but that's an example of having something on there as a second layer. Now, if I wanted to go in here, let's say I want to grab some more sap green and mix up just a really pretty neutral green and add a second sort of darker side to this leaf, I can also do that. So see how I have my little bead of water there? I can rinse my brush and do a technique that's called dragging. And so I have my brush blotted pretty well. I just need to moisten the paper next to where I deposited paint, and that paint will kind of spread and sort of have a mix right there on the page. So I'm just going to leave that be. Grab some more of this sap green and mix it with my mix up here in the plate. I could have a harder line. So let's say I don't want it to be a soft blend, but I wanted it to be a harder blend, and I'm just blotting some of this excess water off. I can leave my hard line there and have that. Now for these leaves over here, I'm going to do a couple different things. So let's say I want to have some that are kind of like a Payne's gray. Maybe I want to have sort of a neutral color, and I just want to add some more leaves. So you can get sort of a similar effect as you have on this flower, and I can just add some more leaves just like this. And it just will kind of make it look fuller. It will add some more interest. And I can even add another color to the mix if I want to. So I'm going into my Viridian to change it up even a little bit more. And let's say I just want to add just a couple like this. I can do that, and now we have a really full leaf branch. Now probably I wouldn't paint it that full in a real life painting, but you can see how wonderful glazing is. And I'm going to hold this up so that you can see a close-up of what that glazing looks like when it's finished. And some of these are still a little bit damp, but you can see the effect in action and that overlap of color. Overlap of different color. You can do details, you can do a cloudy look, you can do a hard edge. There's really a ton of different things you can do. Now on this is still slightly damp, but I'm going to give you a close-up here of the different effects with the color. So we have our neutrals and earthy tones. You've got the same color. You've got a primary mix. You've got your light over dark, your dark over light, including complementaries, and your complementaries over here. And you can see that second layer of yellow just kind of deepens that color. Now, last but not least, we have some wonky drawing because of our very close lines, but these are our glazing sheets where we did some swatches. And so these are just wonderful because you can see, I'll grab this dry one, you can see your pure color here, which is basically a double layer, but you can see some of these really beautiful neutrals that you can get. And this is almost like a 50-50 mix, you could think of it as, but you can see this blue and orange makes a really beautiful brown, and all of these different blends, and it really helps with your color mixing and just being able to choose something out of your palette that, and you already know what it's going to look like when it's mixed together. So I hope this gave you some tips on how to use glazing to your benefit and some of the different things that you can do with it in your art. And until next time, keep creating.